I had been pet sitting for years, so when the Thompsons asked me to watch their cat, Whiskers, for a weekend, I didn't hesitate. Their home was nestled at the edge of town, surrounded by dense woods, a perfect retreat, I thought. The first night was uneventful. Whiskers was affectionate, and the house was cozy. As I settled into the guest room, I noticed an old, ornate mirror facing the bed. Its antique frame added character to the room, so I thought nothing of it. Around midnight, I was jolted awake by Whiskers hissing. I turned on the bedside lamp and saw her arched back, fur standing on end, staring at the mirror. My heart raced as I glanced at the reflection. For a split second, I thought I saw a shadow move behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. Dismissing it as a trick of the light, I calmed Whiskers and went back to sleep. The next day, I mentioned the incident to Mrs. Thompson over the phone. She hesitated before saying, "That mirror has been in my family for generations. Some say it's peculiar." That night, I draped a sheet over the mirror, hoping to avoid any disturbances. But at 3 a.m., I awoke to the sound of scratching. The sheet had slipped off, and Whiskers was clawing at the mirror's base, her eyes wide with fear. Suddenly, the room's temperature plummeted, and my breath became visible. I felt an icy hand brush against my shoulder. Paralyzed with terror, I couldn't move. Summoning every ounce of courage, I grabbed Whiskers and fled the room, spending the rest of the night in the living room with all the lights on. The Thompsons returned the next day, and I recounted the events. They exchanged uneasy glances. "You're not the first to experience this," Mr. Thompson admitted. "We've heard whispers about that mirror, but we never believed them. I never set foot in that house again, and to this day, I avoid mirrors after dark." Pet sitting had always been an easy way for me to make extra cash. I wasn't a professional or anything, but word of mouth had brought me enough gigs to keep my weekends busy. That's how I found myself watching over Daisy, a fluffy white Pomeranian with a high-pitched bark and an endless appetite for treats. Her owner, Veronica, seemed like your typical dog mom, oversharing pictures and leaving an instruction sheet as long as a CVS receipt. "It's just for 2 nights," Veronica said, handing me the keys to her immaculate suburban home. "She's my baby. Please, treat her like one." I assured her I would and settled in, enjoying the quiet of the house and Daisy's playful nature. The first night went by without a hitch. I binge-watched a few shows, played fetch with Daisy, and even slept soundly in the guest room. The second day, though, was when things got weird. It started with a knock at the door around noon. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated before answering. Through the peephole, I saw a man, mid-30s, dressed casually, but with an intense expression. He was gripping a leash and pacing on the porch. "Can I help you?" I asked through the door, my hand hovering over the lock. "I'm here for my dog," he said, his voice firm. "Daisy, she's mine." A cold wave washed over me. I think you're mistaken. Daisy belongs to Veronica. I'm pet sitting for her." The man laughed bitterly. "Veronica? Is that what she's calling herself now? Look, I don't know what she told you, but Daisy's my dog. I have the papers to prove it. I stared at the door, unsure of what to do. I think you should leave. I'm calling Veronica. She won't answer, he said sharply. She stole my dog weeks ago. I finally tracked her down to this address. Before I could respond, Daisy began barking furiously, her tiny body trembling as she ran to the door. The man's tone softened. Hear that? She recognizes me. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding. Was this guy telling the truth? I grabbed my phone and dialed Veronica, but just as the man predicted, it went straight to voicemail. Now panicked, I started texting her, hoping she'd reply. Meanwhile, the man outside began shouting, I know she's in there. Open the door or I'll call the cops. I didn't want to escalate things, but I also didn't want to let a stranger into the house. Please leave, I yelled back, trying to sound braver than I felt. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash. I spun around to see the backsliding door shattered, the man stepping inside. He must have circled around the house. Daisy bolted toward him, barking wildly but wagging her tail, clearly recognizing him. My stomach dropped. See, she's mine, he said, scooping Daisy into his arms. You're lucky I'm not calling the cops on you. Wait, what? I was hired to watch her, I stammered. I didn't steal anything. But he wasn't listening. Daisy was licking his face as he muttered to her softly, his anger now directed elsewhere. I tried to explain again, but he cut me off. Look, I don't know if you're in on this scam or just gullible, but Veronica isn't who you think she is. She's a serial thief, steals purebred dogs and flips them online. Daisy's microchipped. That's how I found her. My mind reeled. Veronica had seemed so genuine. Could he be right? Before I could say anything else, a loud knock came at the front door. My stomach sank further when I peeked through the peephole. 2 uniformed police officers. The man must have called them after all. He opened the door for them, holding Daisy tightly. Officer, this is my dog. She was stolen weeks ago, and this woman is watching her for the thief. The officers turned to me, their expressions unreadable. Ma'am, can you explain? I didn't know, I stammered. I was hired by a woman named Veronica to pet sit. She said this was her dog. The officers exchanged a look. One of them spoke into his radio, while the other asked me more questions, checking my ID and verifying my story. Meanwhile, the man pulled out papers and vet records, showing proof that Daisy was indeed his. Eventually, they seemed to believe I wasn't involved in the theft. You're lucky, one officer said. This could have gone a lot worse for you. We've been tracking this woman for months. Do you have any contact info for her? I handed over Veronica's number and the pet sitting contract she'd given me. They said they'd be in touch if they needed more information. The man left with Daisy, thanking the officers, but barely glancing at me. I couldn't blame him. As the police wrapped up and left, I stood alone in the house, shaken. I'd I'd always thought pet sitting was an easy gig. Feed the pets, play with them, get paid. I never imagined I'd get caught in the middle of a pet theft ring. Needless to say, I didn't stick around for Veronica to return. I packed up my things and left the keys in the mailbox. She never called me back, and I didn't expect her to. For weeks, I jumped every time my phone buzzed, worried the police might need more from me, but they never called again. I still pet sit now and then, but I'm much more cautious about who I work for. And every time I see a Pomeranian, I feel a pang of guilt, wondering if Daisy is safe and sound, or if she's still part of someone else's nightmare. I was hired to care for Bella, a sweet tabby cat, while her owner, Mrs. Henderson, was on a week-long cruise. Her apartment was on the 12th floor of a high-rise, offering a panoramic view of the city. The first few days were routine. Feed Bella, clean the litter box, water the plants. On the fourth night, as I was leaving, I noticed a sticky note on the fridge that hadn't been there before. In shaky handwriting, it read, "Don't look at them." Confused, I searched the apartment but found no one. I convinced myself Mrs. Henderson had left it as a prank and forgot about it. The next evening, I was refilling Bella's water bowl when I glanced out the window. In the building across the street, I saw a figure standing in a darkened apartment, staring directly at me. I couldn't make out any features, but the silhouette was unmistakable. Unnerved, I closed the blinds and continued with my tasks. An hour later, curiosity got the better of me. I peeked through the blinds, and the figure was still there, unmoving, still staring. I called building security, who checked the apartment across the street. They reported it was vacant, with no signs of recent occupancy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that silhouette in my mind. The next day, I returned to Mrs. Henderson's apartment, determined to finish my duties and leave quickly. As I was cleaning, I heard a tap on the window. I froze, my heart pounding. Slowly, I turned to see a handprint on the outside of the glass, at the height of the 12th floor. I grabbed Bella and left the apartment, calling Mrs. Henderson to inform her I couldn't continue. She was understanding, though puzzled. "I've never experienced anything like that," she said. To this day, I wonder who or what was watching me from that empty building, and how they left a handprint so high above the ground.